Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box. My name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and wellness coach. This is episode 223, and I'm calling it, Do I Really Need My Gut Microbiome? The answer is yes, but don't go away yet. I'll get to that in a minute. I just need to first bare my soul about a dilemma I'm having. Recently, I was having a relaxing time just wheeling around the Salem Common right outside my door in the bright sunshine, and suddenly, out of nowhere, an acorn bops me on the top of my head. Now, I'm thinking that must be good luck, because really, what else would it be? A conspiracy? Could all of the oak trees be out to get me? I run this podcast on YouTube, and one of the three people that was listening, I think it was an episode on Monsanto and what Monsanto has been up to. Well, this gentleman, and I say that loosely, took to call me a conspiratard. His exact words were, "The woman that wrote this is a conspiratard." But I didn't mind that. Quite the opposite, in fact. I wrote back and said, "Methinks thou doesest protest too much." I don't know what I was trying to say there, but it sounded good. And then my friend said, "You didn't actually respond to him, did you, Jean?" Well, yes. Anyway, back to the acorns. So I was thinking about acorns, and I got to thinking about squirrels and my moral dilemma with the squirrels eating the peaches from my parents' peach tree. My father had counted about 150 peaches this year, and the squirrels ate all but 4 of them. When I went over their house on Sunday, we caught one red-handed, dashing away with a peach in its nasty little mouth. We were just sitting there peacefully at the dinner table next to the sliding glass doors. I looked up and with my own eyes watched in horror the squirrel bouncing down the limb and grabbing one of the last peaches in its mouth, then scampering away with its bounty, seemingly taunting me. I was helpless to do anything. I could only yell, "Get a slingshot, get a slingshot. Call 911. Who do we know that has an AR-15 that can blast that SOB into pulverized dust?" Then I realized the answer was no one since I live in Massachusetts. So I was clearly taking this personally. And there was just a teeny part of me that wished I could spray pesticides all over that organic peach tree. But alas, I could not go that far. This made me come face to face with the harsh reality of the sacrifices we all have to make to clean up our food supply. Anyway, back to the podcast. Do we really need this microbiome or microbiota growing in our intestines? Well, I surfed the World Wide Web to get a feeling for what the experts now have to say. More specifically, why we need it and what happens if we mess up that delicate balance. First, let's define the microbiome. The microbiome is the genetic material of all the microbes living inside us and on our skin. They include bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and even viruses. The number of genes in all the microbes in one person's biome is 200 times the number of genes in our human genome. Oh, by the way, I am going to be putting the references to the original places that I get this information up on the show notes. So if you want to read the articles, you can do that. Okay, so most of these microorganisms coexist peacefully in our healthy bodies. They mostly occur in our GI tract, but also in other areas of the body. I probably should mention here that microbiome and microbiota are sometimes used interchangeably, but specifically, the microbiome is the collective genetic material, or genome, and the microbiota means the various microorganisms themselves. But it doesn't really matter. We have a unique set of microbiota that start out when we are a newborn and pass through the birth canal. You probably heard somewhere that a vaginal birth is preferable, and that's one of the reasons. So in our first stage of life, our healthy bacteria are determined pretty much by our DNA. After that, our environment and our diet determine whether our microbiota changes in a good way or a bad way. But don't worry, there is always an opportunity to continue to change our microbiota and change it in a positive way. Most of our microbes are good microbes and exist in a symbiotic relationship with our bodies, meaning that we benefit and they benefit. Microbes in our gut do all kinds of things to get the nutrients in our food into nutrients in our muscle cells and other cells. They break down large carbohydrate molecules. They build amino acids that make proteins. Bacteria in our gut can take inactive forms of vitamins and make them into active forms of vitamins. Vitamin B12 is a good example of this. Bacteria are needed in the stomach to make the active form of vitamin B12 and vitamin K as well. It is when we get a disruption of this delicate balance that infectious diseases and maybe even other diseases can occur. The most obvious example is the prolonged use of antibiotics. The antibiotics kill all bacteria, not just the pathogenic ones. Antibiotics have, of course, saved millions of lives. But with modern science and all this tech stuff, we should be able to figure out how we can replace our beneficial bacteria once the pathogens have been killed off. And I think we're getting there, folks. Let me backtrack and give you some information about how nutrients move from our gut into our bloodstream. The wall or lining of our intestines is actually a very thin layer of epithelial tissue. This inner wall is called the mucosa. Structurally, the mucosa is covered in wrinkles or folds. Sometimes they're called fingers, or simply villi. These villi are there to increase the surface area of that lining. This surface layer of cells makes a very good semi-permeable wall because it's very delicate. It's like cheesecloth. It allows very small nutrients like amino acids and single glucose molecules to get through to the bloodstream. I just found this out in my recent reading, but the lining of our intestines is actually the most rapidly renewing tissue in our body. But because this layer is very thin and delicate, it is easily damaged. The result is that we can theoretically get a hole in this wall that lies between our gut and our sterile bloodstream. Once there is a hole, then larger substances like gluten can get through and go straight into the bloodstream. These larger substances are sometimes mistaken for foreign substances like toxins, and our immune system rallies the troops and goes after them. If that happens, we have what we call an inflammatory response to these substances. What I'm saying here is that gluten is not the problem. It's the damage to that delicate lining. So our damaged gut lining is now resulting in all kinds of problems, according to the experts. And our not-so-healthy gut microbiota may not come to the rescue if we're eating food with chemical additives, pesticides, herbicides, preservatives, dairy with antibiotics, etc. Another journal article I recently read suggested that altered shedding of our gut lining may be associated with multiple disorders, ranging from inflammatory bowel disease to Crohn's to ulcerative colitis and even to colorectal cancer. They think in most cases that the inflammation begins in your lower colon and moves up the intestines. The inflammation damages that delicate lining. As the cells on the lining of the colon die and come off, open sores or ulcers can form. There's an excellent article put out by the National Institute of Health, or NIH, that looks at the big picture when it comes to what the microorganisms in our body are doing for us. I'll give you a link to it in the show notes. I'm going to quote them because they can say it better than I can. Quote, "The microbes present within our GI tract, i.e. gut microbiota, have co-evolved with their human host to perform a number of functions we would otherwise be unable to accomplish on our own. Although incompletely understood, the gut microbiota is implicated in a variety of host functions involving intestinal development and function, micronutrient synthesis, and drug metabolism. And this is important. Accumulating evidence suggests that the gut microbiota also plays an important role in the harvest, storage, and expenditure of energy obtained from the diet. The preponderance of evidence demonstrates that the transfer of gut microbes from conventionally raised animals to germ-free animals results in dramatic increases in body fat content and insulin resistance. End quote. What they are basically saying here is that a few studies have found that the gut microbiota is different between thin people and obese people. Scientists are still trying to understand why this is the case. Here is another quote from the paper. Quote, although the gut microbiota is thought to remain fairly stable throughout the lifetime of an individual, transient changes can occur, and some factors can lead to long-term changes in the human gut microbiota. In particular, antibiotics have a dramatic effect on the gut microbiota, and restoration to its prior diversity varies among individuals. Changes in diet may also cause significant and potentially long-term alterations in the gut microbiota. Jumperts et al. Recently showed that in as short as 3 days, the gut microbiota structure in humans can be drastically altered by variations in calorie intake. A study of mice recipients of microbiome transplantation also showed that switching from a low-fat plant polysaccharide diet to a high-fat, high-sugar Western diet altered gut community structure and metabolic function within 1 day. Aging itself also has an effect on the stability of gut microbiome communities. Aging is associated with reduced immune function, increased disease, use of medications, and changes in nutrition, all of which modify the microbiota. End quote. There's another study which suggests that keeping your gut microorganisms healthy may also keep your brain healthy. Apparently, even serotonin is made by our gut bacteria. So maybe our gut-brain connection is even more complicated than we once thought. Interesting. Here is what they are suggesting. An imbalance of unhealthy and healthy microbes in the intestines may contribute to weight gain, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, lowered immunity, and other disorders. Oh my God. I think I need to take a chill pill, but I have my microbiota to think about. So what can we do to help our little invisible friends? I'm so glad you asked. First of all, we can increase our fiber intake. In other words, eat as many types of fruits and vegetables as possible. Try to eat seasonal if possible. They are fresher with less preservatives. It might be nice to support your local farmers market. Number 2, in addition to those high-fiber vegetables, try adding maybe beans, nuts, and seeds. Number 3, choose foods with high levels of polyphenols. You may have heard the word polyphenols with relation to red grapes or specifically wine or maybe cocoa powder, but there are polyphenols in a lot of different foods, and generally foods that also contain fiber. But berries are generally the best sources. Number 4, you can eat fermented foods containing live microbes. Yogurt would be the best source of that. Sauerkraut as well, but personally, not a fan. Number 5, you may want to limit your alcohol. Number 6, try to limit your sugar intake as much as possible. Number 7, use antibiotics when necessary, but don't overdo them. Obviously, it's very important to take the entire dose when you're prescribed them, but if you've got cold symptoms, you've probably got a virus, and they won't help. Number 8, get good sleep. And related to that, number 9, it might help to adopt a stress reduction technique. The bottom line here is that if it's good for you, it's probably good for your gut. In the future, we may be hearing more about something called precision nutrition. And I think what they're speaking about is that down the road, we could tailor prevention and treatment of chronic diseases to our specific genetic background and our gut microbiota. I came across an article on this, and I'll put it in the show notes. So what is precision nutrition? Precision nutrition, or personalized nutrition, is a method of tailoring nutrition recommendations based on a person's DNA, unique microbiome, health history, various environmental factors such as diet and other lifestyle habits, and an emerging area of research that studies metabolites. In other words, we could use our metabolites to explain the health effects of a particular dietary pattern. I guess it's all very high-tech and fancy. Now here's my opinion about all of this. First, I just want to say that I recently listened to a seminar given by Dr. David Katz, a well-known, respected, Harvard-educated physician. He was sending the message that different promoters of different types of eating plans are not all that far apart. Dr. Katz himself promotes the holistic diet approach, which is whole foods as close to the original form as possible, mostly plants, low saturated fat, low sugar, high fiber, etc., combined with some form of physical activity and stress management. I think Dr. Katz is absolutely right, and he makes perfect sense. The problem is, how do we go about helping people make these changes with our current society the way it is? Because quite frankly, our current society appears to be a hot mess where all we want is to be comforted by food. And it's not going to be rabbit food. Now, I don't have all the answers, but I promise you that I will continue to devote my time and energy to helping people make positive changes for themselves and their tiny microbes. And I suppose, just like the squirrels taking the peaches, there is no easy way to coexist and be healthy without some sacrifice. And the sacrifice may be to give up some of what we want for what we need. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.